think we're live. Okay, cool. Sorry, we are having technical difficulties. This is the first time that I've gone live using Facebook in a really long time, actually. It seems like quite a long time. So things have changed a little bit. So apologize for getting started a little late. If you don't know who I am, my name is Kayla. I go by Coach Kayla, founder of Plant-Based Performance Nutrition, Run Coaching, and I help plant-based runners to fuel and perform at their best and reach their personal running goals. So today I wanted to talk about fueling tips leading up to the marathon. So I get questions about this a lot. I know a lot of you in the Facebook group mentioned that you're running a marathon. I know some of you are running Chicago, which is so awesome. Chicago is definitely is a major marathon, so it's definitely a really cool marathon. I have not ran that marathon myself, but I've heard good things about it. And I know New York City is also coming up in a few weeks. I will be at Chicago, but I will be at New York City watching or spectating. So that is exciting. So what should it look like? What should your hydration and fueling plan look like when you're leading up to a marathon? And before we kind of get started here, if you guys do watch this live, right, post hashtag live below, or you can also hashtag replay if you're watching this on replay. And I'm trying to see if I can see the comments, and I don't know. Oh yes, I can see comments. Okay. And two of you are on. Okay, great. It's hard to tell a little bit. Okay. So marathon hydration and fueling plan, what does this look like leading up to a marathon? So the week of the marathon, which if you're running Chicago, this is very applicable to you right now. What should be going on? So most likely you are in your taper phase, right? You are resting, you are prepared, you've done all the work up to now, but that does not mean that we slack on nutrition. Nutrition is the most important time, is right now. It's the week leading up to that marathon, especially those 3 days before the marathon. So hydration, make sure you're adequately hydrating. Really don't need to change anything. We just need to continue to make sure we're hydrating properly. And fueling, we want to also, continue to fuel our bodies properly, eating those 3 meals, 2 snacks, about 5 to 6 small meal snacks a day. That comes out to be. We want to also increase our intake of vegetables, especially those starchy vegetables and grains. Why? Because we want a carb load, right? And we hear this a lot, and I know there are some people skeptical if we really need to carb load that much, but when we're plant-based, most of our food is coming from carbohydrate sources, which is great because most of that is going to be your whole grains, your fruits, your vegetables, and those are high in carbohydrates. But we do want to, really just make sure we're including more of those starchy vegetables and grains. So more of those carb-heavy foods that we may not necessarily eat as much of during the training, which you should be, but we may not. But definitely that week of or 3 days of, you want to make sure you are. So starchy vegetables, squash, sweet potatoes, right? Rice, whole grains, rice, pasta, etc. Make sure to include those, as well as your plant proteins and your fruits, as always as well. The day before the marathon, what does this look like? Well, first, again, we want to stay hydrated. We also want to eat a well-balanced plant-based meal for dinner. So we do want to include, again, those starchy vegetables, grains, beans, legumes, vegetables. We want to include all of that in our meal before, which it may not be perfect. I know, sometimes, pizza or something like that works well for people the day before. Something like that. For me, it's usually a bowl of pasta with vegetables, because usually if I travel, for a race and I'm not necessarily go to like a vegan restaurant, usually if I ask and tell them that I'm vegan, usually they can like come up with a pasta veggie bowl, and so that's usually what I ask for. Can I just have pasta with veggies? And you never really know what I'm gonna get, but it usually comes out pretty good. So but everybody's different, so it's really just finding what works for you or what you realize is your pre-race meal that you like. Do it. Tell yourself also positive affirmations. So this is also important. This is just kind of not necessarily hydration and fueling, but a little bit around the mindset is also important, right? Because you may be getting those, getting that anxiety or nerves because it's the day before. You have one more sleep before that marathon, which is very common. So, make sure to really just tell yourself those positive affirmations. I can do this. I put in the work. I'm going to have an awesome race, right? That mental capacity is so important, right? And also make sure you're prepared with fueling and hydration for the big day. So I know a lot of runners do this. I do this as well, and prepare everything ahead of time, lay it all out, lay out my outfit, my race kit, make sure I have everything, make sure I have all my fueling, my gels, chews, whatever you're using, electrolytes, hydration, all of that stuff. Make sure to lay it all out, make sure you have it all the day before the marathon. And that's helpful too, not just to be prepared, but also, or like to save time, but it also can be helpful mentally because you're mentally preparing yourself as well. And the day of the marathon, what does that look like? Hydration, drink at least 16 to 20 ounces of electrolytes about 3 to 4 hours before the race. So we recommend to, sip on those electrolytes, beginning 3 to 4 hours before. You're probably going to be getting on a bus, maybe getting in a car to get to the race, maybe warming up. So just have those electrolytes with you, just start sipping on them. And we also want to eat a good breakfast that's high in carbohydrates but low in fiber and fats. And why we suggest that is that breakfast high in fiber can cause GI issues. That said, it has been found that like oatmeal or overnight oats, which is the most common thing I see runners do, and that's usually what my breakfast looks like because it's easily transportable and I can just put that in like a hotel fridge, and that seems to work really well. So oatmeal is kind of one of those exceptions to this, even though we think of oatmeal as high in fiber. But whole grain bread is probably not the best thing to do. But it really just depends on the person as well. It depends on you. If you've done that before and it works well, then disregard that. But if you're not sure, if this is your first marathon, better safer than sorry. I mentioned, the overnight oats is a good example. A bagel and peanut butter, banana, a smoothie could be another option. Those are all good options as well. And what about during a marathon? What does this look like? So during a marathon, hopefully you've already practiced this during your training runs, and hopefully you already have a plan laid out for when you're going to take those gels or goos or chews. Or if you're using dates or something like that, hopefully you have a plan. But what that looks like, or what is recommended, is taking those every 45 to 60 minutes with sips of electrolytes if possible. So how this looks like, or what I usually recommend, is taking those gels every 45 to 60 minutes, and then every other water stop, try to have like water and electrolytes. And if you can, kind of time taking those chews or gels around those water stops so you can grab those electrolytes if you don't have electrolytes that you're carrying with you. What the pros do, and what I found out, or I actually at Boston, I ended up getting Molly's water bottle or electrolyte bottle. So what they do is they label their electrolytes and their gels, they tape them together, and they leave them at the water stop. So they just grab them there, or maybe somebody gives it to them. I'm not really sure, but that's kind of how I know about that. That's what they do. And let's see what else. So that's during. So pretty much during. Another thing to know too, if you don't like or don't want to do like juice or gels, the basics is about 25 to 30 grams of carbohydrates, and you'll see in like each chew or gel that's usually around what it is. So every hour we need to fuel our body with that many carbohydrates because our body uses up our glycogen stores, and to replace those glycogen stores to continue to run, we need to replace that glycogen stores with simple carbohydrates or simple sugars. And then post-marathon. Post-marathon, we want to make sure that, after the race to effectively recover well and get back to running. But of course, take that rest. You deserve it. But usually post-marathon, what I recommend is, because we want to make sure we're getting carbohydrates in as well as protein to help that recovery process, I usually recommend drinking like a pea protein shake or plant-based shake right after, with protein within that 30 to 45 minutes. So what this looks like, and what I usually recommend, and this is what I do myself as well, is take protein powder in a shaker bottle with me, and then when I get the water at the end, I usually just add it and shake it up. So that's how I usually do it. I know let's see, some people will take like a protein bar or something like that, or others do rely on like what the post-race food is. I just discourage that. I guess it's depending on what type of race it is, but if it's a major marathon, I wouldn't really think that there are probably specifically vegan options there. There could be, but I guess there could be like, things that you can have, but not necessarily protein. So that's usually the tip that I give people if that's doable to do. And then within 2 hours, having a well-balanced meal with carbohydrates and plant proteins is also really helpful too in helping that recovery process. And of course, replacing those fluids. So hopefully you were hydrating during the race. And also another thing to remember is, I know, with fall marathons, they aren't necessarily as hot. And Chicago, hopefully is a nice cooler day. And I believe the weather is usually similar to New York. So it's not really super hot or humid. Hopefully, some days in October we've gotten those days, but we still need to be taking electrolytes and maybe even salt pills, which kind of depends. May not necessarily need salt pills, but definitely still need electrolytes. So that's just something I like to tell people too, because they don't always think about that. And then they'll get cramps or some things like that because they're low on potassium, magnesium, because they weren't taking those electrolytes. So those are important. But again, hopefully you did that during training and kind of figured that out, what works for you and what your plan is going into the marathon. And then also, have that beer, drink that beer, celebrate. You did it. You ran a marathon, which is an amazing feat. So if this is your first one, congratulations. And I'm so excited for you. This is your first major marathon. That's also amazing as well. Or if you are a seasonal marathon runner, hopefully this was helpful as well. If it, gave you some other tips or things that maybe you didn't think about or you weren't really sure about. So hopefully that helped as well. And I do see a couple people on. Does any of you have any questions? Hi, Joyce. I'm so glad you're on. I feel like I haven't gone live in forever, so this is so fun. Any questions about fueling, hydration, leading up to the marathon? If you're on or watching this replay, let me know too if you do have any questions leading up. If you are running this weekend or next weekend and you're not really sure, we can always hop on a call. I'm always glad to help, so just let me know. I don't see any questions, so okay. Great. So yeah, as I said, if there are any questions that come up during the week, if you watch this on replay, just let me know. I will also be posting this to the podcast as well, so people can listen to that there as well. And yeah, hopefully everybody is doing well, and I hope that you're healthy and all of that and safe. I know a lot has been a lot has been going on, either injury, illness, hurricanes, so many things. So hopefully you guys are safe and healthy and running well and all of that stuff. So keep eating plants and running, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Bye.